A red alert issued at this historic extreme weather as it takes hold of the Texas farming community. Texas Agriculture Commissioner Sid Miller warning, quote, "No feed, no water, and no heat does not make for a good situation. The leading energy state has no power." That's crazy. Sid Miller joins us now. Sid, how did this happen in terms of this massive power outage?
Well, it's poor leadership and poor management. I'm embarrassed for my state. We're dumping about $8 million worth of milk every day here in the state of Texas. The shelves are bare in our grocery stores of any dairy products. We've got poultry producers that are suffering. We've got little chicks and hatcheries that can get no power, so they're freezing to death. We've got eggs and incubators that get no heat, so they won't ever hatch. We've got feed mills that can't mix a batch of feed. We've got dairies running out of feed. We've got chicken houses that can't get feed and feedlots that can't get feed. It's unexcusable, the situation we're in. We went through this one time back in the 80s, but it lasted 3 weeks. It was 3 times as bad as this situation. We had plants powered by natural gas. We had coal-fired plants. We had nuclear plants. We didn't have any wind turbines. We didn't have any solar power. We got through just fine. We got a problem, and I'm embarrassed that I'm here having to talk about it.
Welcome back, everybody. And yes, I know I'm in a monkey costume today. I have to go to the big city. I'm doing a meeting, have a meeting there. So I am wearing this, but it's good because I haven't put out a video in a week. So I thought I'd make a video for you guys, and then I'll be in the city and there'll be Wi-Fi there. So I'll be able to upload the video for you guys. So that's exciting. But what I really want to talk about is I want to talk about the lessons that, that are blatantly obvious that, we should be learning from Texas, right? And so these are 5 things that I think are important to look at and really important to understand, okay? And surprisingly enough, I know a lot of you guys are going to be surprised, the one lesson that I'm not going to talk about because I think it's really unnecessary is that people are unprepared. I think that goes without saying. And I think harping on that really does injustice to the preparedness community as a whole, right? Because it's so easy for me to get on my high horse and be like, hey, I live on a homestead. I produce a lot of my own power. I produce, hundreds of thousands of pounds of food every year. I do this, I do that. Yeah, I can compare myself to somebody else, but that doesn't help me. By belittling other people to make myself feel good based upon my preparedness posture does nothing to further preparedness as a whole, and it does nothing to perpetuate my preparedness into the future, right? Because it should be me competing against me. It should be trying to make the better version of myself every single day. So I think that's important to realize, and that's why we're not going to be talking about how other people are unprepared, because like I said, we know that goes without saying, and harping on I'm better than them mentality does nothing for us, right? We should be calling out inaccuracies. We should be speaking the truth, and we should rely on the empirical data to lead us and project us into the future. So the first lesson that I think it's important to understand from a preparedness standpoint is Texas, as great as Texas is, they have their own independent power grid system. They have a lot of their own infrastructure. They are not in a position to secede from the union. The reason why I'm putting that in there as a good lesson learned is because a lot of people, and people have been saying it for a long time, that Texas is somehow going to secede from the union and do all this stuff. It's nonsense. There's no state that's going to do that. I mean, Texas has been brought to its knees because of an ice storm. Now, imagine if there was other implications like military conflict, economic collapse. Texas is great as a state, not so great as a country. And I think this ice storm has done a significant job in proving that and showing that. So I think that's an important thing to note. And it's important that we look at that into the future as we decide, everything from preparedness locations to just geopolitical stances on sustainability and preparedness, because they go hand in hand. Okay. So there you go. Number 2, like the agricultural commissioner Sid Miller said in the introduction of this video, livestock, poultry, milk, oil, all these industries have been affected. Okay, so what you are seeing is you're going to see a nationwide impact immediately on food, and we're seeing it. We're seeing it not only with food, we're seeing it with poultry, livestock, animals. Let me give you a great example. So this was a post that was put on Craigslist here in my local area. Let's take a look. So your eyes do not deceive you. You really have somebody that is trying to sell half a dozen, so 6 fertilized laying eggs that are ready to go in the incubator, right? Incubating eggs for $50. Like I said, your eyes are not fooling you. Somebody really thinks that they can get that money for it. In reality, I think they can, and then you sell $20 for 6 Orpington chickens. You can call those chickens rare as much as you want, but I wouldn't consider them to be that rare. They're not $50 for 6 eggs rare. But with what's going on, at least in agriculture, there's a lot of hatcheries that are in Texas and Missouri, and a lot of places that have been affected either by a transportation issue or by the actual blackouts and infrastructure issues caused by this ice storm. So it's not above the fray to realize that people are willing to spend high dollar, on these agricultural products. I mean, the commissioner said it perfectly himself. Milk's having to be dumped out right now because there's no energy, there's no electricity to run these pasteurization machines. Hatcheries are having to get rid of all their eggs that are in the incubators because the power's out and they can't run those industrial incubators, and then the chicks can't be warmed with the industrial heaters because there's no propane, there's no natural gas, there's no oil that can be transported. Transportation's at a standstill. So even if you did have products that are ready for market, where are you going to go? You're snowed in. So this is all going to have effects, right? Because I know, at least in my state, the feed stores are saying before the ice storm that they're going to be waiting till March 1st, early March. Usually you have, chicks in the feed stores ready to go February 1st. Well, that's not what's happening here. People are having to wait till March, and then we'll continuously see it push to the right. I'm hoping there are areas that aren't dependent on these hatcheries that are able to get chicks, and I hope that for those of you guys that are watching this, there's chicks that are being sold in your area. But this is something I've talked about in great detail before. We're not going to rehash it out, but there is a lot to be said when you have an entire state that has no chicks available. And this is the season, and people are wanting to get into chicks more now than ever. Last year, we saw a huge uptick. You weren't able to hold them. You weren't able to hold on to them. And even with me, we dealt with a power outage here, and I realized that was coming. And, I prioritized, and I got them hooked up to the solar generator so we could not lose our 2 incubators full of eggs. And they've hatched out, and now we've sold them, and we're waiting for our incubators, another 28 days so we can get some more ducks and chicks, and we'll keep this process going. So, it's safe to say in this case that, things are very independent and very dependent on each other, right? And so, like we're seeing, this is going to blow over. I'm not worried about it. Things are going to blow over. Things are going to be fine. But as we start progressing down, you can expect that these events can take longer and longer to fix and to remedy. And so I think it's very important that if you yourself are not going to be a local food producer, you should know your local food producers, right? And you should make good relationships with them, because you don't want to be the person that's trying to fit the bill for, $50 for 6 eggs that you're hoping to hatch out so you can have eggs, hopefully 6-7 months down the road. And there are lots of us that are willing, compared to what other people out there that say they won't, sell chicks or barter or whatever, there are lots of us out there that just want people to have good quality livestock animals. I'm happen to be one of those people. I'm not here to profit off anybody. I'm not here to, take advantage of any situation. I think people should be prepared, and I think that people should start to look at pets. So keep that on the back burner, that, when you have a state like Texas that's huge in agriculture, there are issues. And that's something that the Texas Agricultural Commissioner is embarrassed about himself. So I think that's important to realize and to plan in your future preparedness. Number 3, this is going to be extremely unpopular, but it needs to be said. Just because you can afford something doesn't mean it's owed to you. Now, what does that mean? That means that just because you have the fiat currency to make an exchange for a good or service does not mean that it's automatically owed to you, right? Just because you can't afford the power for a month or afford to have power doesn't mean that the power company is required to give you power. Just because you can afford gasoline does not mean that you are entitled to gasoline. Just because you can go to the grocery store and pay for a turkey or a chicken or a bag of rice does not mean that that's owed to you, right? The grocery store doesn't owe you anything. The power company doesn't owe you anything. Big oil does not owe you anything. And I think that in this current preparedness climate where we look at preparedness as an allocation of resources based upon fiat currency and your ability to negotiate those services therein, that it's important to realize that you're not owed anything, right? I know that when I go to the grocery store and I have money, 9 times out of 10, 99.99999% of the time, yeah, I can make an exchange. I can make that purchase. But I also know in my mind, in my heart, that I'm not owed anything. That is why I do my best to not depend on that infrastructure. Don't depend on the grocery store for your food, right? Because I'm not owed anything. That's why hard work, blood, sweat, and tears allows me to produce my food here on the homestead. And that's important to me. And the reason why that's important to me is because I know I'm not owed anything. I go into preparedness with a very humbled attitude, knowing that I am not owed anything. I'm not. I'm owed nothing. That's why by having true, honest, unequivocal ownership of myself is having responsibility for the human condition. Extreme ownership. Because I know I'm not owed anything. I know you don't owe me anything. I don't owe you anything. The grocery store doesn't owe me anything. The gas station doesn't owe me anything. Just because I have the fiat currency to make that purchase does not mean I'm owed anything. That's why it's so important to be sustainable, and that's why it's so important to forge those relationships, and that's why it's so important to be a practitioner, to do the things. Grocery stores doesn't owe me anything. That's why I do what I do here. Number 4. Let's start off number 4 with a great headline. Number 4, it really goes without saying. People would rather you suffer with them than to rise above the event or situation or rise above the ashes, so to speak. I think the Ted Cruz situation debacle really levels it out for you. Now, I'm going to say this. My feelings on the matter of whether he should have stayed or should have gone are 110% irrelevant. They are irrelevant, okay? What I think is important from a lesson standpoint is not my feelings on the situation, but the true empirical data and the truth behind it, okay? And that is this. It is not Ted Cruz's responsibility to prepare for you and your family. And every second you spend worrying about what somebody else is doing is time that goes against effectively being the best posture and preparedness that you could possibly be. That's the truth of the matter. That is empirical. Regardless if you feel like he should have been there, regardless if you feel like he had every right to leave, the more time you spend making your feelings based upon how somebody wants to allocate their currency and allocate their time and resources is time being detrimentally served against you. It is weakness. I know people don't want to hear that. It's truth, though. When there's a power outage here, or there's a storm here, or when there's anything that happens in my geographical area, I give 2 fucking shits what Ted Cruz is doing. I give 2 shits what any of my elected officials are doing. I don't care if they're here. I don't care if they're in Cabo. I don't care if they're in Cancun. I don't care if they're in France. I don't care where they're at, because it's irrelevant. My posture and my feelings and my happiness and my joy do not come from where those people are or what those people are doing. Absolutely not. I do not derive joy or disdain from what elected officials, celebrities, athletes, news anchors for what they do. I don't, because that's weakness. It is weakness. It shouldn't matter what they're doing. The only thing that matters is my family prepared? Am I prepared? Is my group taken care of? And when there's a need, it's my job to go ensure that that need is met. It's extreme ownership for the human condition. That is what preparedness is. And people don't like to hear that. I know that's an unpopular message. I don't care. Those people aren't taking care of my group. Those people aren't taking care of my family. It is not their responsibility. It's my responsibility. Those people aren't putting fencing up at my homestead. Those people aren't raising and taking care of my animals. Those people aren't putting solar panels up on my homestead to ensure that we're able to create power and effectively do what we do. Nobody's doing that. So their opinions of what they do with their money and where they go on vacation and when they go on vacation is irrelevant to your preparedness posture. So worrying about that is just weakness. But as a collective and as a whole, you can spout the truth as much as you want. But people who are not prepared feel some kind of way about it. So it's important to realize that as somebody who is prepared, you can expect people to be very upset that you are not suffering the same kind of suffering they are, right? That you are not in the same detrimental position that they're in, right? Because when you are preparing, they're not. But when you are prepared and you are able to flee the situation, whether that's actually flying away or if that's just being prepared, you can expect people to be upset that you're not suffering with them. That's a human condition. That's a human condition piece. Then lastly, remember the markets, right? And this is going to be important because what's going to happen the next 5 to 10 years when it comes to commodities is going to be something that's never been done before in the history of mankind. What do I mean by that? Water in California is starting to be traded on the stock market. And it's just a matter of time before other municipalities, cities start doing it. So what happens next time this ice storm happens in Texas, right? That glass of water is going to have a price tag attached to it based upon what hedge funds in New York City think about your water supply that day. Just think about that for a second. Every glass of water price is going to be determined by people that live all over the world and what their opinions are on your water infrastructure. Brings a whole new meaning. Brings a whole new meaning to scarcity. It brings a whole new meaning to resource acquisition. These words are words, they mean something and they matter. It's very interesting. It's very interesting times. So just realize the next 10 years, 5 to 10 years, are going to be very telling for how integral and how interchanged things are. Like I said, it's a pretty crazy world we live in. It's a very interesting thing to think about that, an ice storm could cause people to lose faith in that infrastructure, and therefore you can see stock to go down. And then while that water stock's going down because there's an ice surge, you can expect people to see the ice storm coming and then wanting to dump their shares and do a squeeze, right? Big short squeeze, right? And then you see other entities like Redditors that would artificially hold up the price so that they could watch these hedge funds lose money. I mean, just look at the intricacies. If GameStop hasn't opened up a can of worms as to price manipulation and what can happen on the stock exchange, it's crazy. And I will say, GameStop's one thing. Your municipal water supply, if it's traded on the Wall Street, that's something completely different. I think it's important that we think about it, stay cognitive of it, and most importantly, prepare and plan for that, because it's an eventuality that we're going to see. Well, there you go. Those are my lessons. Tell me what you think. If you think I got something wrong, leave me a thumbs down. Leave me a comment in the comment section below. I'm very curious. I really want to know what you guys think. What lessons did you learn from this Texas debacle? And by Texas debacle, I just really mean the ice storms that have happened all throughout, the Bible Belt, throughout the Midwest there. What do you think? What are some of the lessons learned? What are some things that you are learning? And what are some ways that you are, protecting yourself and insulating yourself from those detrimental effects that we're currently seeing today? I'm curious to know. Let me know in the comment section below. As always, guys, long live the Republic.